Bus compression or master track compression or glue compression, whatever you want to call it, is one of the most helpful things in a mix, but a lot of people don't really teach it well, in my opinion, or they gloss over the most important parts. So what I want to do in today's video is break down bus compression, master track compression, so that you can get really great glue compression in your mixes that you feel confident about. Let's jump straight into Logic and take a look at it. Now, we're going to start on just a Logic stock compressor, but we're also going to look at how you might apply those same concepts to a couple of other very popular compressors for this purpose. Okay, now the way that you should be thinking about bus compression is that you want it to move with your mix so that it's gluing the mix together. Everything feels cohesive, but it's not necessarily squashing the mix and it's not necessarily creating this really obvious pumping. Sometimes those are tools that you want to incorporate into your mix, but if you're just getting started out, you should focus on just getting it to move in with your mix in a way that's helpful to the mix. So I'm going to give you basically some general parameters that are very, very common in just about every mix that you can take and use right away, even if you struggle to hear compression. But over time, I do want to challenge you, try out some more aggressive compression, maybe some faster attacks, some faster releases, things like that, that will give you a different flavor. But starting out, start with what we talk about in this video, and over time, maybe expand if it makes sense for you. Okay, so the first thing that I want to talk about is the attack. This is how quickly your compressor is going to pull down on the signal after it exceeds the threshold. So you set a threshold, which is just saying anytime sound passes this volume, I want you to turn the signal down. You want to have an attack time that lets that initial hit through and then pulls down. That way you get the dynamics of the song, but then it's also moving in time with what's happening in the song. So generally speaking, an attack time of around 30 milliseconds is a great starting point. That will let that initial hit through of whatever's coming through, and then it's going to turn it down just a little bit after that in a way that moves with the mix. The next thing you want to be thinking about is the release, how quickly it lets back up after it turns down from that initial hit. Generally speaking, I like to keep this around 100 milliseconds. I think that's a really good sweet spot for most mixes. If I'm working on a really slow mix, I might slow this down a little bit. If I'm trying to get a more obvious pumping effect, I might speed it up a little bit, but this is a good general starting point for most mixes. And then a fun note, by the way, is this auto feature on Logic is actually not overriding this release time. It's kind of working in conjunction with it. So I tend to leave it on, but you can turn it off if you want it to always release at about 100 milliseconds. Okay, after that, you should be thinking about your ratio, how aggressively it's going to turn things down inside your mix. Generally speaking, you want this to be between 2 to 1 up to maybe 4 to 1. Think of it basically as gentler and more aggressive. So in gentler music, or if you're just trying to have more gentle compression, less obvious, less aggressive compression, lower. And if you want to have a little bit harder, go a little bit higher. You really don't want to go super high, generally speaking, on your entire song unless you're going for that effect. So something you could play with later. But for the most part, usually around 3 to 1 is a good starting point, and just lighten it if you're trying to make it less obvious, less intense, make it a little bit more aggressive, maybe 4 to 1 if you're trying to go a little more intense. This is a rock song, so somewhere around 3 to 1 is pretty appropriate for us here. Now, the last thing you need to do after you get this dialed in is makeup gain. This is just bringing the volume back up to make sure that the compressor isn't making your signal quieter, and you're not thinking the compression is actually making your mix sound worse just because it's making it quieter. So use the makeup gain to make it the same volume roughly when the compressor is off or on. Now, fun fact, just turn auto gain off if you're working in Logic. It's not very good. Most compressors, I don't find it to be very good. Just setting your makeup gain manually is going to be a little bit more accurate. And there's no science to it. You're just looking for roughly the same volume off and on. Okay, the last thing we want to do is turn our threshold all the way up, and then we're going to dial it in until we're getting somewhere between 2 to 5 decibels of gain reduction on our meter up here. Okay, let's go and dial this in. Okay, so what you want to notice when you re-engage it is that it's roughly the same volume, but also that the subtleties of your mix kind of get brought up. Everything just feels a little bit more up front when this is engaged. So check this out. This is going to be off, and then I'm going to turn it on. right? right? It just kind of brings up everything in between each individual hit. Now, notice my makeup gain, a good rule of thumb, as I said, there's no exact science to this, but a good rule of thumb is that this is never going to exceed the volume that you're turning the signal down. So here I'm turning it down probably about 4 at the biggest peaks, but on average, I'm turning down somewhere between 2 decibels, somewhere in that range. So somewhere around 2 decibels is a good starting point for me. Bypass it off and on, and that seems about right. Okay, so that's the main thing that you should be thinking about. A couple little bonuses with this is the distortion that you have built into the Logic compressor is actually really great. Distortion sounds bad, but this is just emulating some of that analog saturation that comes from using actual hardware units in the real world. This is giving you a little bit of that flavor, and my rule of thumb is just turn it to soft on your master track compressor and make sure your output gain is set to -2 decibels. Now, you can absolutely get great glue, master track compression, bus compression with just the stock Logic compressor, but it's very common, especially because this compressor is kind of one of the linchpins of the entire mix, to really experiment and try to find the perfect compressor for you and the music that you're making. Different compressors sound a little bit different, especially once you start getting into analog emulation compressors. So I want to talk through at least one other of the main compressors you should know about really quickly. But before I do that, I just want to highlight that this is one step of the entire mixing process. In fact, I would say that this is half of one step. This is half of the third step of the mixing process, second step of the mixing process, in my opinion. And if you are struggling to get a mix that you're happy with in general, I want to give you something to help with that. It's my 6-step checklist to a pro mix. It just goes through the 6 steps that all professional mixes have and how to do them. It's really going to help you out, so be sure to pick it up. It's completely free. But let's go and look at maybe the most popular bus compressor of all time, and that is the SSL G bus. This is from analog consoles way before my time, or out of my price range, if you will. And this thing is incredible. This is just the Waves version. There's great ones from UAD. I'm not trying to sell you on any specific plugin. What I want to do is kind of give you a template for how you should find one that speaks to you. So what you want to be doing is trying to get your settings as close as possible to the stock compressor that you're setting, that you're now comparing it against, and just then A/B, go back and forth between the two. So I want to get this one set as close as I can, so that then when I compare it to the Logic compressor, we can just decide which one do we actually like the sound of better on this specific mix. And sometimes what you'll learn is that some mixes will do better with some compressors, other mixes will do better with other compressors. But if you're generally mixing and making similar type of music, then you're probably going to have 1 or 2 compressors that work the best for most of the music that you're making. But with this, let's go ahead and just play around. So I already have an attack time of 30 milliseconds, a release time of about 100 milliseconds. So that's about the same. My ratio is 4:1, which is as close to 3:1 as I can get. I could go gentler, but because this is rock, I'd probably be closer to 4:1. So that's as close as I can get it. And then let's just make sure that we're getting about the same amount of gain reduction, somewhere around 3 to 4 decibels. Turn it on. Maybe a little bit more. Okay, so now that this is pretty close, let's just flip back and forth between these 2 compressors and just determine which one you like better. So you'll see I'm turning them off and on over here. Just let me know in the comments below which one you like better. I'm going to try to pick out for myself here. So what do you think? What did you hear? To me, what I heard is that Logic compressor is actually a little bit fuller, a little bit more aggressive, more obvious, whereas the SSL compressor sounded great, but was a little bit more transparent, which I actually think in this song, this Logic compressor won out to my ears personally. You might feel differently, and again, on different songs, it's all going to be different, which is why it's important to start training your ears to hear these subtle differences. Now, again, most important thing in this video is these settings and understanding how to set these compressors to really glue your mix together, not being overwhelmed by it. These general settings are going to serve you in most songs, so just get started with this. Start really trying to listen for it, hear it, and over time, you're going to develop this ear for compression if it's something that feels tricky to you right now. More important than all of this is keeping it all in the concept of all of this is just to serve the song, to make the music sound as good as possible, and to make us happy with the product that we're putting out into this world. And if you're struggling to get mixes that you're happy with, if you don't already have my 6-step checklist to a pro mix, be sure to pick it up. It's completely free. It's really going to help you out. If this video is helpful, be sure to let me know in the comments below. I'll see you in another video real soon.